Good evening, Margaret Gilbert here, life coach. I'm here today to do a talk on talking about children, talking about death and dying with children. And the reason why I picked that topic is because parents have asked for it to be discussed. So again, I'm a life coach. I'm very interested in working with families, with people that are interested in changing their lives, lifestyle, and interested in working with people who are into health and wellness. So to get started, we're going to just have a look at the topic, how natural it is, what age children start thinking about it. Then we're going to look at what we can do as parents to support them and help them. There's tips and tricks just for supporting them to do it as best as we can as parents for them. So I suppose for the majority of us, talking about death and dying is a taboo subject in our society. We rarely talk about it. And I know myself, my heart stops when I think about it, but I suppose the biggest concern that I have is that I will hope that when my time comes, that I will have done everything I have wanted to in life, that I have enjoyed it, and I have enjoyed the trip, rather than be regretting when I get to my end of life stage that I haven't done this or haven't done that. So again, it's a taboo subject, but what we need to remember with that is when we were talking about children and death and dying, it's very natural for them to actually think about it. And it's actually frightening when we think that children as young as 3 years of age, 3 to 5 in preschools, actually think about death and dying. But they think about it in a non-permanent way. They don't actually realise that death is permanent, and they may ask questions about what happens when the body goes in the ground. Will they be cold? Will they be coming back? Will we go to heaven to see the person? So it's very abstract for them, and they're not really taking on board the permanency of it. They're too young for it. But then when children start stepping up to 5 to 8 years of age, our comprehension and our understanding of death and dying increases. It gets more sophisticated. So children at around 7, 8 begin to realise that death is permanent, it's irreversible, and that it's inevitable, that it's going to come to all of us, it's universal. And then they begin to think about the fact that they're going to die, that they're going to lose loved ones, and that causes a lot of angst and anxiety and fear for the children. So I suppose it is understandable that the fear increases with our understanding that death is permanent, and that it's going to come to all of us, and it's going to come to the people that we love around us. But what research tells us then is at that age when children start talking about it, and when they're worried about it and fearful, and they open us up to us about it, it gives us a huge opportunity to help them develop the next 2 stages of it. And the next 2 stages of our understanding of death is actually thinking of the biological finishing of our functions. What we mean by that is that we begin to understand that the heart stops, that the lungs stop breathing, that the brain dies. So we begin to understand death as biological processes that end. And then the next stage is actually to realise what causes biological processes to stop, like heart attack, or we can have extreme trauma to the body, we can have brain hemorrhage, stroke, all these things, cancer, that they begin to understand these cause the biological functions to stop. So I suppose the research suggests that when we talk to children about it, when we're open and honest about it, and talk to them, and talk in terms of the biological functions and the biological endings of the workings of the body, then it does reduce fear, and it does reduce the anxiety levels. But at the same time, teenagers actually carry a lot of that anxiety around death with them as well. takes a good few years for that to really kind of subside and settle with some children. Some children aren't don't delve into it as much as others. But if we have a child that's asking questions, then we know they have a need to know, and they're looking for factual and honest knowledge from us that will help them and support them. So that's very important. It's a rule of thumb. If they're asking, then they have a need to know. And that goes with a lot of other subjects in life. So again, what we want to give them is age-appropriate information. We kind of get an understanding of the questions they are asking and answer them as simply as possible without going into things too elaborately. But then if they ask deeper questions, then we know they need to go deeper with it. Alright, so the just understanding death and dying and knowing that it's permanent and that it's going to come to all of us doesn't just account for all our fears around death. There are other factors that are influential in it as well, because you'd have culture. What does our culture say about death? What does it teach us about it? Is there life ever after? Isn't there life ever after? Loss of pets, loss of loved ones, and very significantly now, because we're in the crisis with this pandemic, with the COVID crisis, there's probably a lot of talk, maybe in families. I know we're not meeting out in communities and things, but the television, the news, the media is portraying deaths all the time. And so they can begin to evoke fear and stress and anxiety around death and dying for children. So again, our cognitive ability to be able to understand death and dying again impacts on how we understand it, how we process it, and how we deal with it, and how we perceive it, and how we think about it. All that affects how we deal with it, and whether it's going to cause anxiety in us, or whether we're going to kind of, be happy out with the knowledge and move forward from it. So I suppose the social factors, then how do we deal with death in our family and all that kind of thing are other big factors in it. So I suppose to help our children around this, when children are asking questions around death and dying, we have to have a huge understanding of what's our feelings around death and dying. How do we think about it? What's our philosophical, our spiritual or religious beliefs around death and dying? Are we comfortable with the subject? Are we comfortable enough with it to be able to speak comfortably with the child? Because if we're not very comfortable with the subject, then it can instill more fear in the child. So again, how comfortable are we with it? Can we think about what values around death and dying do we want to instill in our children? What do we want to pass on to them? What would we like them to remember and take from it? Other things that we can look at is for ourselves, can you remember back when you were young, did you have a fear of death and a fear of dying? And if you did, how did it manifest? Where did you get support for it? And what worked to help you get over it? What were the strategies and tactics you used? Or did you just keep all that inside you locked up? How did it manifest for you? And how do you want to explain death and dying to your children in terms of your religion, spirituality? I'm checking notes here occasionally just to make sure that I keep on track. Or your culture. Different cultures have different way of looking at death. I suppose predominantly in Ireland we have had a Catholic ethos where people have spoken about death in terms of going to heaven and the spirit living on and the soul living on and things, and I suppose a lot of people would have looked towards that. But there are other ways out in society. Some religious look at religions look at things like life ever after and resurrection, and they're looking at incarnation. So again, what are your beliefs, what are your values around the culture, spirituality and all that you want to transmit to your child? So again, before we engage in conversations with children, it's very good to maybe sit with yourself and explore that. Now, if it's a difficult subject for you, maybe you need help. Maybe you need to get a bit of support from every counsellor, therapist, someone, just to help you talk through this, or even talking out with a partner, or husband, a mother, father, something, getting a huge sense of where you are with this, so that you're very careful that your fears around it maybe aren't instilled in the child as well. So again, we come back to the basic rule of thumb is, if the child is asking the question, then it means they have a need to know. What I would always say is, get an understanding of where the child is at. Ask them questions. Don't jump in straight away with answers, explanations. Ask them questions. What do you think about it? Tell me what's in your mind. What is it you would like to know? That gives us insights into the levels that we need to go to in the explanations. If a child is just saying, I want to know if Nana's coming back from heaven, then that's a very simple explanation, or around with the child, a small discussion and things. Whereas if a person is saying, look, I'm afraid that when I die, I won't be coming back, and will I be lonely up there, and will I, all that kind of thing, I'm afraid that you're going to die, I'm afraid that Nana's going to die, I'm afraid that I'm going to die, then that is a whole different level of conversation that we'll delve into. So by asking a lot of questions, asking the child, what would you like to ask me? You know, what would you like to know? Asking them, is that enough information for you? Have you enough of it? Do you want to tell me what your fears are, or, you know, how do you manage them? So these are all the questions we can ask the child. And I suppose one interesting thing in this time of crisis, and with the COVID and everything, it would be important maybe to ask the child, where did you hear about that? Or, you know, have you been seeing this somewhere? Because a child may well have been watching a film program. It could be the bear in the big blue house, and somebody in the show may have died, a friend, an animal, or whatever it is. Then it might evoke that conversation and the thoughts in the child, which would be very normal, and one can bring the conversation back in to the child's understanding of what went on in the pictures that day, the film, or whatever it was. But the child might also give us information that they might be getting a lot more information from the television and the news and social media around death and dying, that might be driving this natural curiosity and fear and anxiety about it. You know, so it's very important in times of crisis like this, when there's a lot of negative news, that we limit the amount of news and social media time that children are exposed to. And if they are exposed to some negative information, we need to have a small conversation around it. You know, what do you think of that? Get the child's understanding, get what they're focusing in on it. There's a lot of people, you know, in hospitals, they might be more concerned with the hospital aspect of it. They might be more concerned with they getting it. They might have seen someone their own age pictured on television dying with it. So again, by asking the questions and just having the conversation around it, we just get an understanding of what are they taking away from this program that might be bothering them, and we might be able to set their minds at rest and things. So research does show that talking with them about it in very concrete ways and things does help. So I suppose I'm very big into having the conversations with children, being open and honest. Lying to children is never acceptable. Never acceptable. It causes huge difficulties and inner conflict within the child, and it does impact on the relationship. So honesty is always the best policy. But one thing we must be very careful of is that we're honest with them, but we give them very careful information. It's very clear, it's very concise, and it's very concrete. So when a person asks us what happens when a person dies, we can say their body organs stop working, they stop breathing, and they die. And we say, yes, they're buried in the ground, or what have you. And yes, depending on your religious beliefs or what have you, I'm just going by what might be my own in this situation, is that, and then their soul goes to heaven. That's very concrete, very basic information. It's concrete, it's no lies. It might sound harsh, but if I went about softening that for a child and saying to them, look, God really wanted Nana, she was so good, took him to heaven, then I could be doing a lot of damage, because the child could then think, I don't want to be good, because if I'm good, look what happened. Nana was so good, God wanted her and took her. So being good doesn't have good repercussions. Again, if we soften up as a child that we put our doggy to sleep, he's gone to sleep and he's gone to doggy heaven. What do you think happens to the child when they're going to bed that night and they're told go away to sleep? Because their thinking is very unsophisticated and they haven't the capacity to problem solve or kind of think things through lots of time. They have unsophisticated thinking, and it could be well that if I go to sleep I could die. So we have to be very, very careful how we phrase it to children. Buttering it up and softening it so they won't feel the emotions and the pain around it can do a lot more damage. So we need to be very concrete. Yes, this is what happens. And what we tend to do is give the concrete first and then the spiritual side of it after. That yes, the body has stopped, the organs have stopped working, and you know, if we can, it was caused by that they had cancer or what have you. Yes, they were buried in the ground in a coffin, it goes down into it, and no, they won't be coming back, and no, we won't be able to go and visit them in heaven, but what happens is their soul goes to heaven. Their very being, what was nice about them, what was the good parts about them that's going to live on in our minds and things, that has gone to heaven. And the most important thing then, what we want to do with children is leave things on a positive note. So then we're going to say, what we are left with are the most beautiful memories of this person. Go into a chat, try and leave the conversation with the positives. That person, I really, really loved it when Nana came and played with us. Nana minded us, Nana made the most beautiful bread. Whatever it was that meant so much to that young fella, remind them, have the conversation about it. And again, a new phrase that has come out, well, for me anyway, in the last 9 or 10 years would be, we're going to celebrate their life, not more than their death. And again, if we can kind of instill that in the children, we really celebrate their life. We'll sit, we'll think, we'll talk about them, we'll enjoy them, because they're forever here in our heart and our soul, and their soul has gone up to heaven. Now, depending your religious background, your spirituality, whatever it is, your culture, what beliefs you want to instill, then there can be add-ons to that, like that people do come back in another life, there's reincarnation, that is, there are different beliefs out there that the spirits can talk to us. Whatever your belief is, you can extend it, but we need to go with the very, very concrete first, so we don't do more damage. We put the fear of God into the child, the fear to go to sleep in case they would die in their sleep and things. So we need very concrete stuff. When an animal dies, I'm an animal lover and I adore them, but I do know their practice for teaching the children about death, grief and dying, because when they die we mourn them. It's a loss, it's a grief, and when we as parents have the opportunity to support a child through that, it's huge. It teaches them the skills that they have been through this before, they can manage it, and support them when they do experience the loss of significant people in their lives later on. They have been through this process, they have come out the other end of it, and they know how to cry and deal with it and talk about it and go through the stages of grief. So again, we don't butter things up and hide them. And rather than saying a dog goes to sleep, again, it would be something very simple as the dog gives him an injection and it stops the heart and there's little or no pain for the dog, and then it would be all over. You know, the dog would be out of his pain. Then again, we try and shift the conversation into what are the positives. remember the day the dog did this, remember the day he ate that shoe, oh, that dog was beautiful, he'd be tearing around the house if he was here now. So again, we're celebrating the time we were with the dog and the animal or whatever, rather than really going into mourning of their death. Now, grief and mourning and all that have their place, but when we're talking to children about it, what we're trying to bring them round to always is, yes, we grieve and things, but then we help ourselves to move on by talking about the positives. Celebrate the life, celebrate the time with them, and that's what is the most important. So again, when we talk to children about it, and they ask us the dreaded question, will you die? What's the truth? Yeah, I will. Straight out, honest answer. But how do we frame that with positivity for the young people? But I hope to live a long, happy life. I hope that at 90 years of age I'm going to be running around like Nana there, cleaning the house and sweeping up after us. I look after myself really well, you know, I eat well and all that, so I take care of my health. So there's no reason why I shouldn't live a long life. So I'm doing everything I can to make sure I live a long, happy life. Again, we focus with the child. You do an awful lot that's healthy. You eat healthy, you're running, you're racing, you're doing all those things. So again, we all live and hope to have a big, long, happy life. But again, we're not lying to the child. We're not lying, it's the truth. And if they say to us, I don't want Nana to die, what's the truth here? That again is, I don't want Nana to die either. I love Nana. If anything were to happen to Nana in the morning, I would really, really be upset. But what we can do is, we can spend as much time as we can now with Nana. We'll go and visit her Sunday and we'll carry her down the cake and we'll keep Nana going as best we can. So while Nana is here, we'll really enjoy her. We'll tell her we love her and we'll spend our time with her. Again, we don't want children to think I'm the reason we're keeping Nana going or anything, so that if Nana dies, feels I didn't do enough for her or anything. But what we are doing is just instilling in them that we will spend as much positive time as possible with Nana while she is alive. And that's all that we can all do. They need honest, concrete truth. Establish your own values, beliefs, philosophy around death and dying. Be comfortable with the subject and talk openly with your children. Now, some children, when they talk about death and dying, they might be a bit obsessed with the subject, and it might go on day after day, and every night they go to bed another. Whereas some children will ask a question or two, and you could be settling down for a good hour's conversation, and then all of a sudden they've switched on to something else. Follow the child's lead. Follow the child's lead. If they switch on to something else, switch on and go with them. If they want more information about the subject, they'll come back with another question. Hi Jill, thank you very much for joining in. I'm very late online tonight, but for those that aren't viewing it tonight, it will be on my Facebook page anyway to be viewed at a later stage. So again, we're trying to look at our own values, our own belief systems, so that we're going to instill that in the children. And that's very important, because if we have a huge amount of fears around it, then we'll instill that in the children. So the other thing that we can look at is reading books. There are a lot of books out there. I have put up a list of books that they're not recommended reading, they're suggested reading. You can explore it, Google it, there's loads of books on Amazon. But again, they teach the life cycle. They believe when people begin to understand the life cycle, how it starts, and it links with biology, then it makes understanding life and death and being less anxious about it easier. So I put up links there. There's links to about 5 books, and I suppose what's there in some of the books is it talks about the life cycle of a butterfly and a caterpillar. But I have also put up a book there that's very relevant to children and young people with autism, often their need around death and dying can be around the biological aspect of it, very much so. They're looking at how the breathing stops, the respiratory rate, the heart stops, and they don't often get the fact that talking about death might be upsetting to the other people around them. So this is a book specifically targeted to answer their questions. Now it may be very suited to other children in the family as well. Hi Marie, thank you very much. So those books are just there, that if you want to look into reading them with a child, it starts the conversation. It gets children thinking. We sit with them and we talk about it. It's something that's taboo. We don't like it. We a lot of us, including myself, don't think about our own death and how we would like it to be or what we want from it. But like I said, I do hope that when I get there, that I will have achieved the most of what I can, and that I'm happy that I pushed the boat out and I got out of my comfort zone and I did as much as I could humanly possibly in it. Now, to go back again to our books, you have some books may be very relevant to children with ID, intellectual disabilities, and maybe other disabilities. They may need to read the book again and ask questions. We might have to answer their questions again and again and again, because sometimes, especially for 3 to 5 year olds, the concept of death and dying is abstract and they don't think it's permanent. We've looked at for children from 5 to 10, they really get a sense that it's permanent, it's inevitable, it will come to all of us at some stage, and they fear dying themselves and losing others. So again, the books just help with understanding the life cycle. There's one book there that I mentioned, it's the 8 to 10 year olds, that goes into a lot about the biological explanation and things. Now, there's hundreds of resources out there and hundreds of books. They're not, like I said, I'm not recommending these specifically, but I'm saying they are good reading, and the majority of them are around a long time, and there are others out there. Search around and see what suits your child. So I suppose it brings us back to, again, the most important thing for children in any subject matter is honest, open communication with parents. Happiness in life is not about the big job, not about the big house, not about the big car, but it's about being happy in our relationships, being able to connect meaningfully with other people. And sitting with our children, having these conversations, is opening that up to them. It will stand to them far more in life than any education will. It's what life will be meaningful for them. So don't be afraid to have the conversations. And I also put up links there to 1 or 2 articles on research and a website that's very good on this subject matter. So again, just research it and be very comfortable yourself with it. But take from this that is natural for children as young as 3 to 5 to talk about death and dying and to think about it in non-permanent terms. And for children then 5 to 10, it becomes more prominent to them that this affects everyone and it's inevitable, and I'm going to be part of that. But what I will say is it does give anxiety and cause fear in children, but if it's over the top, if it's affecting the child so much that they're not going to school, they begin wetting the bed, they're crying at night and that kind of thing, and they're not managing it very well, then I'd be suggesting then that you seek a bit of extra support for your child to manage that fear and anxiety. And the first step would be attending a GP and maybe getting a referral to children's psychological services. And also play therapy can be another good option. But again, children naturally think about it, but if it's impacting them on life in a very negative way, then they may need that extra bit of support. So I'm just wondering, before I finish off, has anyone any questions on what I have said? Okay, if any questions come in at a later date from reviews of the video, I will answer them. So I want to thank everyone for attending tonight and listening to me, and to anybody that reviews it in over the next few days or week or two. Any comments or feedback would be appreciated. If there's another subject you would like addressed, please let me know and I'll try to address it. Again, thank you very much for tuning in tonight. Margaret Gilbert, Life Coach. Thank you.